Hello, Vesperisms listeners. Before we get started, I want to take a minute to invite you to join Vesperisms on Patreon. You can support this podcast with a subscription for as little as $2 a month. You'll get live monthly video chats with me, early access to Vesperisms episodes, full unedited interviews, prints of my illustrations, and even signed copies of my books. I'm looking for more ways to welcome you into what I do and to be part of this together. Many of you have written to tell me that you just needed someone to say out loud what you'd been thinking too. And my heart is to help artists and non-artists alike to foster an unapologetic artistic worldview as a way to think through what's going on around us in a more high-resolution way than the boxes we're constantly being forced into. There's strength in numbers, and it's important that not only do I connect with you, but that Vesperisms listeners can get to know each other. So I want to welcome you to become Vesperisms patrons on Patreon. It also helps me financially to set aside the time from writing and illustrating my books and to create more encouragement and soul food for you. So please go to patreon.com/Vesperisms and sign up today, won't you? I'd love to have you aboard. And now, back to the show. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Vesperisms, the art of thinking for yourself. I'm your host, author-illustrator Vesper Stamper, and I'm here to help recalibrate your artistic worldview. So grab your coffee and have a seat here in my studio, and let's have a chat. This is Season 2, Episode 4, Motherhood and the Working Artist. What follows in the next however many minutes is a true Vesperism. You get that title, right? This is a podcast based on my observations about the artistic worldview and the artistic life. I'm not a journalist or a sociologist. I am a good researcher, but most of that time and focus in research goes toward the historical periods of my novels, so I'm not going to be dropping stats and figures here on the podcast anytime soon on any subject. What I am, though, is an artist, and that is one slice of the millions of slices that make up the vocational pie of this big human family. It has its own set of idiosyncrasies, but being an artist isn't exalted over any other vocation. And another thing that I am is a mother. I'm not the first, and I'm not the last, and I'm not the only one of those either. I mean, I do my best. I try to be intentional with my parenting, but as with the rest of life, I'm learning as I go along, just like anybody else, and I'm trying to just leave some breadcrumbs for the next traveler. So in true Vesperism style, I'm going to share with you some observations and opinions on the choices that go into being a working artist mother. I am sure I will ruffle a few feathers in this one. If you're a diehard feminist boss babe, I'm probably going to make you mad. If you're a granola crunchy, child-led parent who lets the kid make the rules, I'm going to make you mad. Or who knows, you might actually find yourself agreeing with me. But you know what? It's good for you to hear both people you do and don't agree with, especially people who have this strange thing called life experience. We give life experience short shrift these days in favor of innovation and novelty, but I'm sorry, it's the historical researcher and human nature junkie in me. I simply don't think that way. So think of this more as an art school critique, only on the subject of working motherhood. And the roughest critiques often produce the most growth. For some of you, I know that this will be a painful subject, and I want you to know that I'm aware of that. Maybe you're struggling with infertility, or you haven't found a life partner to start a family with. Please know I'm not trying to cause anyone pain or exclude anyone or make anyone feel guilty about her own choices. Actually, my aim is to help women who are considering this specific subject of working artist motherhood. I'm trying to help them make informed choices that are not based on emotionalism, and they're not based on past experiences of pain, but on factors we don't always know are out there, factors that they don't always tell us in school or whatever. At the end of this episode, whatever stage of life you're in, all I want you to know is that every woman artist can and is allowed to make the best decisions for her with the knowledge she has and the circumstances she's in at the time. There are lots of podcasts and articles out there about being a working mother, about being a working artist, about work-life balance and how to look Instagram fabulous while throwing your kids a spontaneous magazine-worthy after-school party just because your kids are that inspiring and you're that inspired by them all the time. Oh, and you're never tired and you're pulling down high six figures in your career so you can afford to have a live-in nanny and your family can afford to all wear matching outfits every day of the week. Isn't that awesome? And they're color coordinated with your living room too. If that's what you're looking for, let me suggest this is not the episode for you, my friend. This is also not the episode for you if you're looking to hear how to be a badass CEO who's bravely forging new paths for feminism. You'll know the end is nigh if you ever see me wearing a t-shirt proclaiming that the future is female or holding a coffee mug that says boss babe. Sorry, maybe some of you don't know what to think or feel on this subject. You're young, you're aspirational, but you're not sure how you'll ever balance family and career. Maybe you've been hurt by your own family of origin, and so you're not sure you even want to have kids, or you think that you have to choose between these two mutually exclusive desires, and you think that you have to break your own heart on one side or the other. We're going to talk about all that. I often go to universities as a visiting artist, and high schools too, and many times a young woman will pull me aside, and she usually won't ask this in the formal Q&A. She feels like she has to whisper the question. She'll ask me, how do you do it? How do you have a family and a career? In fact, one of my classmates in grad school told me, we're all watching you to see how this is done. So I began to think over my training. I went to a rigorous, career-oriented arts high school and two well-known illustration schools, like very vocational, business-minded, yet no one had even one serious conversation with us women about how to do this. We were just told that on the one hand, really serious and successful artists don't have children, or that we could have it all, do it all, and be it all, and that it all had to happen at the same time or we had somehow betrayed feminism. We women are told such a fat load of lies, it is unbelievable. And it's unfair. So I'm going to tell it to you straight and hear my heart on this. I'm not here to tear anything down. I actually want to encourage you. I want to give you pathways forward. I want to clear through the mess and present to you real, accurate, and honest choice factors without guilt or emotionalism so that you can live your friggin' life. So I'm now what could be called a seasoned mom. My kids are almost grown. I'm through the stages of parenthood that are the most physically and time challenging and intense. And I've seen some outcomes, both in my own kids and in others' kids, both good and bad. And I've seen outcomes in parents, both myself and my husband and others, good and bad. And I've learned a thing or two that I hope will help you as you think through your own decisions. I'm not going to go over certain details in here, such as the minutia of childcare, because we'd be here for hours. But this is meant to give a framework for how to think about working artist motherhood. Okay, with all that being said, are we ready? So take a deep breath, and here we go. Here's the first truth. Women have always worked. For most of history, true, that has taken place in the home, whether that's been paid or unpaid. But by the way, that was true of men too. Most people worked out of the home in family trades or cottage industries or subsistence farming. This was true until the Industrial Revolution and the advent of the factory. And the cheaper mass-produced goods that gave people all these new factory jobs, they also made the standard of living rise. And by the post-World War II era, women, for the first time, other than like the minuscule aristocracy and royalty, they had the option to be unemployed and stay at home. For some women, this worked. There was a stronger social cohesion back then, and women like my grandmother were able to get together with friends during the day and let their kids play together while they had coffee and talked about stuff. And so they felt a certain amount of support and togetherness in this parenting thing. But for some women, it meant that there really was this glass ceiling or even a brick ceiling because their career ambition was stifled. Women were outright prohibited from certain schools and professions, and when they did work, they faced horrendous harassment and exploitation in a truly misogynist culture. There was a lot of good that came from the women's movement of the 1960s, and we owe a lot to the women who broke through those barriers for us. Universities and companies and even parents were forced to take a hard look at their official and unofficial discrimination against capable women. Because of those pioneers, women are now able to pursue careers in any field in which they show competency. More women took leadership in government all over the world, and now women dominate in the university and in certain high-earning fields like medicine. But we have to keep in mind, this is all incredibly new in the scope of history. There's a reason why there's such a question mark out there about work-life balance, and it's because we're still in the middle of an enormous experiment. Nobody knows how to do this well, because it's never been done like this before. The effect of women going into the external workplace on this scale, it can't be denied. That effect was a fracturing of family cohesion. Paid childcare puts a burden on family finances. Work is exhausting and takes time from family relationships. Divorce rates climbed commensurate with women pursuing full-time careers. I'm not making a value judgment on individual cases here. It's just simple human dynamics. One thing has to give. I'm saying that with less time and focus on family and home life, those relationships frayed to the point that now roughly 40% of marriages end in divorce in the United States. Career and family are often in conflict, and without realistic expectations and huge intentional effort, one side will lose, and it's often the family. Here's the second truth, and this may blow your mind, but your career is just a job. Career means your long-term job, but family means your long-term people. A career can be satisfying, but it's nothing compared to healthy relationships. I say that from experience. When your relationships are struggling, your marriage or your kids are in trouble, even the most successful career loses meaning. And you know what? That's true even when everything's going well. Here's something from my own experience. I can tell you, coming from a very broken family, that I never pictured myself having one of my own. I abstractly thought that I might have kids someday, but more so that I could do everything the opposite of what my family of origin did. I came from a big family of career women. It was a real, true matriarchy. None of my aunts or my mom or even my grandmother stayed home with their kids because my grandmother, once her kids were a little bit older, became a real estate broker. And because she and my grandfather were raising me, she just took me to work with her. So I never questioned that I would pursue a career in something that was meaningful to me. The thought of staying home with children was completely alien. But my plans took a different turn when I met my husband, and I was quite young when we met. And we were both artists, and because we were so young, we figured everything out together, what it looked like to be working artists. Sometimes that meant having other jobs and doing our artwork at night. Sometimes it was temping in an art-related field like web design or art handling, or even my time working in an art supply store. And when we did decide to start a family, which was totally his idea, I had to think hard about what it actually meant to parent in the opposite way than I was parented. I was a child of neglect, and in my parenting or in my work for children, I never want any kid to feel like they are an afterthought. I wanted my children to know how deeply they were loved and wanted, and how much we were rooting for them and preparing the way for them to live responsible, ethical, and loving lives, because our philosophy was they were future adults that we would have to unleash on the world someday, and we really wanted to do a good job. So I decided to stay home with them, but it wasn't as much of a decision as a function of what was already happening by being a working at home freelancer. At every juncture of these decisions, I was pursuing my career. But much of the time, honestly, it was exhausting, and it wasn't just because of kids and job. See, all throughout my 20s and most of my 30s, I had a debilitating chronic pain syndrome and ridiculous undiagnosed medical issues. I often lamented that I wasn't advancing the way I wanted to, and that it was my own body's fault, and that if I could just leave my body, I could do my work. And then with the little kids and their constant needs, it was hard to find those long 6-hour stretches that you're used to from college, those long sittings at the drawing table where you can really just get into your flow, I wouldn't call the early years of child rearing a flow state. But that season actually didn't last that long, and I'm glad I focused on building that relationship with my family and especially my children. See, the battle made me scrappy and resourceful and resilient. It made me humble and realistic without losing my ambition, because it truly made me confront how important art was to me. It tested my resolve in a way that nothing else could. Art school taught me how to draw and paint and negotiate with clients, but it was parenting that made me an artist. Here's the third truth, and this is going to break your heart, but most artists never get famous. I tell this to every high school art student and undergrad I meet. The ones who hit it big right out of school, they are the outliers. They are the rarest of the rare. They are anomalies. Most of us, I'm sorry, but we have to do the equivalent of scrubbing toilets for the first 3 to 5 years of our careers. Maybe that's graphic design toilets. Maybe that's the dance toilets. That's just a reality. It's true if you're pursuing medicine, you have to do your residency and you go where you're told. It's true if you're a dancer and you have to earn your stripes in the corps de ballet until you get a role. It's true if you're an artist and you just have to do endless Photoshop production and masking out sneakers for the New Balance website or coloring endless animation cells for a Nickelodeon cartoon, both of which I did. This girl right here, and it sucked. But hey, 22 years in, I'm still a working artist, so it worked. My point is that a lot of us go into the arts with stars in our eyes. And yes, I'm 22 years in, and yes, I love my job. I adore my job. But hear me, at the end of the day, as I said, it's just a job. I can say with authority that it's not ultimately the most satisfying thing in my life. It doesn't deliver on its promises of constant fulfillment. And my career is nothing compared to these precious humans that Ben and I have been cultivating together. They are not a job. Yes, when you're changing diapers and wiping mouths and picking up toys and teaching them to read, it can feel like a job, even like true drudgery. But when you care for someone who's really dependent on you, the most important thing happens. Your self-centeredness is displaced by love. Notice I didn't say replaced. There are some truly selfish people walking around as parents out there, but you can choose to cultivate a love that displaces the natural self-focus that we all have, and the narcissism that can actually be exacerbated by an endless focus on your own career. Trust me, I'm saying this as someone who is not selfless. See, at the end of the day, unless you have like a household staff, we all still have to make dinner, do the laundry, scrub the shower, we still get sick, our parents get older, we get behind on bills. In other words, no one gets a pass on the mundane, on daily life. And that's true whether you've won an Oscar or a Caldecott. So why not go through it with some people that you love? And why not take what you're learning about life and orient it outward instead of inward? To take the best things you know about life and train somebody to be better at this life thing than you are. You can't be an endless adolescent. You can't go out for drinks every night forever. You've only got so much time on earth before you die. You might as well contribute to the health of the world, and you might as well cultivate whatever selflessness lies dormant within you and grow it into something heroic, like loving a child into healthy adulthood and doing it as an artist. The fourth truth. Biology matters. Any discussion of motherhood has to be realistic about fertility. Age is a major factor that women cannot ignore. An interesting dynamic has emerged in the last few decades. As parents have become more hovering and protective, and as schools have focused more on testing and less on cultivating independence, kids who go to college are simply not as prepared for adulthood as in previous generations. We all know that. Whether that's emotionally, spiritually, financially, owing to huge student debt from a useless degree. And that means that marriage and childbearing are getting pushed later and later. But there's a problem with that. Women's fertility does not last forever. Say it with me now. Women's fertility does not last forever. It's harder to get pregnant when you're older, when you might project that all your ducks will be in a row, but there's no guarantees that your ducks will be in a row, and that by the time they are, that conception will work. And adoption and fertility treatments, they're friggin' expensive, and they're often heart-wrenching. Look, you take risks either way, but you have to make your calculations based in reality, not fantasy. I wish to God that someone would sit girls down in high school and college and present a big pro and con list. On one side, it would say, having kids when you're young. And on the other side, it would say, having kids when you're older. So here are some of the things that I would put on that list. You probably have more, but this is to give you a realistic look at the choices because there are pros and cons to both. All right, having kids when you're young. Here are some of the pros. You're at peak fertility. It's overall easier to conceive. You're statistically less likely to lose a baby through miscarriage or to have a baby with congenital defects or Down syndrome. Babies are not as expensive as everyone makes them out to be. Look, I slept in a dresser drawer. So you probably can afford it if you're financially smart, which you should be anyway because adulting. Your own parents are probably still young enough to help you at that point. Your friends are probably having kids at the same time, so you can swap used clothes and you can share childcare. You're not as jaded by life when you're young. You have a ton of energy. You can bounce back from childbirth easier. Hey, you'll be the young hot mom. And when your kids are older, you'll still be the young hot mom, only now with way more experience and resources. Little kids, they're little for a very short season, very short. And at a time in life where most people make a lot of changes, your kids are likely to be as young and resilient as you. Also, as I said, fighting for your career makes you scrappy. And because your career would be growing alongside your children, they get to be a big part of it. And they get to be your biggest cheerleaders. That's pretty cool. Okay, and there are some cons. All right, here are some of the cons of having children young. The truth is you will not advance as fast in your career as you could have if you didn't have your kids around. Even though their littlehood is relatively short season, and you may feel jealousy or resentment of them sometimes, or jealousy or resentment of your childless friends, but you're going to need to fight those feelings so that your kids don't feel it and internalize it. You'll need to keep your skills up if you want to continue your career, but that's true in any field. And it will take the aforementioned scrappiness to make the time to create and to make the space. All right, so here are some of the pros and cons for having kids when you're older. Ready? The pros. You likely have more money. I mean, conversely, you might also have more debt. You may be more established in your career, which might allow for more maternity leave if you work for a company or if you've saved up some expenses to live on. You might be able to afford higher quality childcare. Here are some of the cons. You have far less energy than when you're young, and you're likely to be really set in your ways in a way that kids will definitely disrupt. You'll probably have fewer kids than you may want because of declining fertility, and that can put pressure on only children or smaller families to bear the brunt of caring for each other and you down the road. Other moms will likely be younger than you, and it can be harder to relate to them or to make friends. When your kid is entering adulthood, the generation gap will be glaring. You're likely to be further into the sandwich of taking care of both your parents and your children at the same time, and you'll be looking at paying for your kids' college while simultaneously looking toward ensuring your own old age safety net. Okay, that's a lot to think about. If these are decisions that you're working through, I would encourage you to make a similar, literal, written down pro-con list of your own, and do it by talking to experienced mothers, not just bloggers or influencers who make it look good, but people whose life and parenting outcome you can see. People who have made these different decisions, whether having children young or old, whether having children or deciding not to. Ask them what they would do the same way again and what they wish they'd done differently. And then make your own decisions based on what's right for you. Here's a fifth truth. Family is good for artists. A creative home can be a happy home. It gives you skin in the game. Look, I create work for children, which is why I'm wearing a t-shirt of The Little Prince. I make this work for kids from babies through young adults. And having my own kids means that the work I create is first for them. But I'm also aware that my audience are other people's children, the children of parents who are making similar decisions to myself, and I feel an immense responsibility toward those kids and their parents. It's not just about my own self-expression, but a sense of mission that I have to the world. I'm creating work that helps kids have more life tools at their disposal than I did, and I'm creating work to help kids become grounded and loving future adults. Whatever your medium is, parenthood can be an important part of that. It can give you a fresh perspective. It can give you new eyes and compassion for others. You know, we all know it. Artists can be really narcissistic, but it doesn't have to be that way. Whether it's through parenting or it's through other long-term, other-centered work, We can fight that tendency to be self-centered and inward. The choice I make to put my husband and children ahead of myself does not in any way negate me as a woman or as an artist. You might be able to tell that I'm a pretty self-actualized and confident person. I don't need a ton of scaffolding. I believe a large part of that comes not from hours of self-help and meditation and yoga retreats and spa visits, though I do try to take a healthy bit of time for myself now and then, of course. No, my confidence and my sense of self as a working artist mother comes from the reality of working out both my life and my art daily, in the trenches, when things are really uncomfortable, sharing the triumphs and losses in the context of very intentional family life. So as we close, I want to check what I've said against the 4 principles of Vesperisms and see if we can focus it through the lens of an artistic worldview. Because you can choose to see motherhood as an artistic practice. So let's see. Number 1, artists see. When artists are properly oriented toward the truth, we see our situation with clarity, even if it's uncomfortable. This includes real, factual considerations about motherhood and family. Number 2, art is human-centered. So if your art is taking away from your relationships, you're not in a healthy place, and you need to change some things. We feel our art so deeply that sometimes it even makes us suffer. But the kind of suffering that comes from sabotaging human relationships for the sake of art, that's not proper. We must not make others suffer for our art. Number 3, art is open and expansive. We don't need to play by rules of scarcity. We can love and create. We live in possibility, and the artist is specifically equipped to look for possibility because we live as walking question marks. We live the question, what if? And number 4, art allows for growth and change. So we can allow for seasons and life transitions to be what they are and to see the beauty even in the painful seasons, because that's how we grow. We can ebb and flow and be flexible and make the best decisions with the information we have right now. Thanks for joining me for this week's Vesperisms. If you liked this episode, by all means, would you leave me a 5-star review on iTunes and share it with your friends? You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. That'll help others to find this podcast and spread the message of this artistic worldview to more people. You can follow me on Instagram at Vesperisms and subscribe to my newsletter at vesperism.com to get news about my work and a free outtake chapter from my newest book, A Cloud of Outrageous Blue. You can buy my books wherever you love to buy books, and please ask at your local independent bookstore first. And when you've read my books, please do me a great favor of leaving a wonderful review on Amazon. That really helps me as an author. Music for Vesperisms is provided by Ben and Vesper, and that's my band. My friend, whether this episode applied to your situation or not, let's support each other in this tough but vital work of creating honest work and life for the world we're part of, because your voice at every season of life is important. Your contribution matters, and just remember, work isn't everything, but everything, including parenthood, is the work. See you next time.